Oh, hello. You just caught me reading the souvenir London Marathon edition of The Observer. I'm in there somewhere between Daddy Pig and the two blokes who went under 2 hours. I'm 3:07:16. Ian Martin. That's me. I'm going to do a review of my London Marathon build and the race itself. You're probably not interested. You probably don't want to hear any more about the London Marathon. I mean, there's 1,300,000 entered for next year. Everybody will be banging on about it. But hopefully, if you stick around, there's something useful in here for you. How I decided at age 59 that I wasn't going to try and target a sub 3 marathon. And actually, what I was going to do was just try and secure a good for age and then go for something bigger next year, which would be a sub 3 at 60. Sub 3 at 60. I was in two minds before I started the marathon this year as to whether I was actually going to go for sub 3 or not. It's actually race morning when I decided not to go for sub 3 and to settle for a good for age instead. So there were 6 reasons why I didn't go for the sub 3. The first one was 2 weeks before the final week, I had an all-inclusive holiday in Madeira with my daughter. You know what all-inclusives are like if you've ever been on one. Lots of food, lots of drink, but I wasn't drinking, more about that later. And basically, very little exercise, very little movement. I went with my daughter, she's 11 years old. She does like to do a little bit of running, so we did a couple of miles twice in the week. When I came back, I felt very lethargic, very stiff. My body at 59 does not respond well to drastic changes like that. And I came back, tried to jump straight back into the mileage, and my calf went as stiff as it possibly could be. So I had that going into the race. It was fairly hot. I mean, not as hot as last year for all of the you who ran it last year and want to say how hot it was. But it was hot enough for me at 80 kg, thereabouts, 80 kilograms in weight. I don't go well in the heat. So I kind of thought it wasn't optimal for me to go for a big sub 3 effort. London's crowded, point three. Anybody who's done London knows the crowds are superb. The atmosphere is electric with a wall of noise from start to finish. But it's quite difficult to get going, especially if you're at the back of wave 3, which is where I was. And actually, it took me 15 miles to catch up with the pacer that was at the start of wave 3, who was doing 3:10. So yeah, I mean, it was basically very difficult to get a clear running line. So it's all kind of building up to me doing a good for age. And then there were some other things going on outside. I also cycle. So I've got this thing called Vattenrunden, which I think is Swedish for round a lake or round water. It's basically a 200-mile, 315k cycle sportive round a lake in Sweden. And I have that to do in June. And so I didn't really want to come out of the marathon and think, yeah, well, I'm now totally wasted for a week or two. I wanted to be able to jump on the bike and start doing some miles as soon as I could. Point five may be relevant to some of you, maybe not. I changed my insulin pump setup. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I changed my insulin pump in March, and that takes a bit getting used to in terms of managing my blood sugars during training, managing them during the race, and just basically being confident that I wasn't going to have a hypo, run out of basically sugars, and end up hitting the wall, and not being able to move on. So I had that to deal with. And then finally, number 6, if you're still here, I actually kind of got philosophical about what a sub 3 might mean at age 59. I thought if I broke 3 when I was an M60, it would be more meaningful. It would be something that actually would have a better ring to it in my mind. I think fewer people do it. I would say I've looked on Power of 10 when it's available, and it's about 30 runners in the UK a year in the 60 age category and older are doing it. So yeah, sounds like a decent challenge, something that I would like to do. So all those things conspired to make me think, actually, this year, let's run a good for age. Let's try and get under 312, which was the good for age for last year. I'd aim for 307, 308, hopefully be comfortably in for the good for age. And then I could reflect on this training block, which is what I'm doing now. And I could actually say, this worked, this didn't, this is what I need to change for next year when I'm going to go for the sub 3. So, as I said, I finished London in 3:07:16. More importantly than the time, which was kind of irrelevant really for me as an experienced runner who's been running, for 50 years since school days. I finished in really good shape. 2 days later, I jogged around a local 10k race in 50 minutes, biked there and back, managed about 160 miles on the bike that week. So I was in good shape. Compared to Edinburgh Marathon, which was last May, which was my qualifying race for London, I could barely walk for 3 days after that race, and it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't something that I wanted to repeat again. So that's what the build achieved. My legs were good after the race. I felt good. I was able to start training again. But there's a lot more to analyse from the race than just how my legs felt. So if you want to stick around, you want to listen to a little bit more analysis, some data analysis, and some other kind of lessons for masters runners who maybe you're not going for a sub 3 at 60, but maybe you're also chasing a challenging goal as well. So a little bit of context about me, first of all. I'm going to ditch the paper. I've run one sub 3 marathon before in my life, and that was in 2022 in the Boston Marathon, USA. I finished in 2:59:15. I also once ran a 3 hours and 7 seconds at London. That was a while back, pre-super shoes. I also finished the Manchester Marathon once in 2 hours, 59:45 seconds. But that was the 380 metres short version of the Manchester Marathon, which therefore nullified my time. So 2 very close sub 3s, pre-super shoes, and then bring in the super shoes in 2022, and I actually cracked it at Boston. Obviously Boston, for those of you who know, it's quite a challenging course. It was a headwind that year as well, unlike this year where they had a good tailwind. It was a headwind, so that was a good result for me, Boston. But it's 4 years ago now, and Boston was my biggest mileage build ever. For that marathon. What was it? It was about 33 average, 33 miles per week for the 16 weeks leading up to Boston. A lot of walking, time on my feet, a lot of biking as well. But in general, that's as high as I can go mileage wise. I don't enjoy racking up mileage. I prefer running fast and short, and deliberate mileage build was something that I wanted to do this block. It was something that I wanted to experiment with and see how it made me feel. I may have, left it too late now. It's going to be 5 years since Boston when I did the sub 3. I may have left it too late at 60 to have a proper go at sub 3 again. My plan this time was to build 16 weeks of deliberate mileage. I was aiming for 40 miles per week. So Boston was about 33. I was aiming for 40 if I could. It's a nice round number. I kind of like to work with round numbers. I know it doesn't seem a lot, 40 miles, compared to what most marathon runners are doing. But previously, I'd averaged about 34, 35 for Boston. When I did Edinburgh last May, I averaged 27 miles a week. Very low mileage at Edinburgh, but it hurt like hell. And I didn't want that again. I did 3:09:53. Turned into a headwind and hailstones at 18 miles and crawled home after averaging 6:50 minute mile pace on the way out. So I didn't want to do that again. I wanted to build mileage like a marathon runner should. I have got away with low mileage mainly because I do a lot of cycling. I ride online doing Zwift stuff with the Zwift Team Type 1. I'm generally fairly strong aerobically from a lot of exercise over my life, but it's the durability that I need for the marathon. It's the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments that need building up strong. Generally, my legs are the things to go, not my heart and lungs. Here's the 16-week build analysed from data that I collated on runalyze.com. I averaged 36 miles a week across the 16 weeks, so fell short of the 40. But the median, if we ignore the kind of outliers there, the median was 42. It was just 2 weeks, week 7 and week 15, that dragged me down. Week 15, we've already talked about, was Madeira. Couldn't do much about that. It was Easter, it was a holiday, it was a nice time with my daughter. It wasn't ideal for a London Marathon build, but this is a real life. This is what happens. And actually, I wouldn't swap having a holiday with my daughter for a week of 40 miles of mileage. That would be obsessive. That would be something that would be an alarm bell to me. So being a normal runner, being a masters runner who wants life to take precedent over training, that week was unavoidable. And it was the wrong part of the block, but it was unavoidable. Week 7, which was another low week, was illness. That was me having a dose of man flu. Can't do much about that. Just jump back on the mileage bandwagon and keep on going again. So I got away with jumping on the mileage bandwagon after my illness in week 7. But as I explained before, in week 15, when I went to Madeira, I didn't get away with jumping back on the mileage bandwagon. Left calf went really tight. I had to have 2 sports massages that week, and I wasn't actually sure that I was going to make it to the marathon start line. Tightness, stiffness, injuries, all that kind of stuff, part and parcel of old age. And at 59, there's no getting away with it. It's old age. I've had ongoing sciatica and proximal hamstring issues throughout this block, had them in the Boston build as well. You try to stand as much as possible. You try not to sit down, which exacerbates the issue. But sometimes you've got to sit down. Sometimes you need to go and fly to Madeira and drive to the airport and get the coach from there. And, you end up sitting down for 6 or 7 hours without a choice. And yeah, that didn't help. What did help was a sports massage, was gentle movement and avoiding any aggressive stretching. I'm not a physio. I'm not trying to give you advice as to what you should do with a proximal hamstring issue, but I've had Achilles issues, hamstring issues, all sorts of issues, and generally sort of easy dynamic movement helps me. I learned to warm up very slowly and thoroughly before going out on a run. I even, before the London Marathon, walked from King's Cross to Chelsea Bridge where I was staying. I walked with my bags 5 miles rather than sit down anymore on a tube. And most people would say, stay off your feet the day before the marathon, don't do any unnecessary exercise. But to me, moving around, keeping moving was better than sitting around too much. So back to the 16-week block. Because I do a lot of cycling, I also use intervals.icu. I find that a nice little interface to manage my overall load. So that's effectively the kind of intensity and duration of any exercise that I'm doing, which includes, for me, mainly biking, some walking and running as well. So they're all visualized in here, and there's a total load at the bottom, and then there's kind of split into run, bike and walk on the kind of histogram above the one at the very bottom. And then they're kind of split into zones as well, and the histogram just above there. And the zone stuff, I generally, because I was trying to just build mileage this block, I didn't really worry about doing any speed work or much marathon pace work at all. I simply tried to build the mileage without worrying about the speed. Don't get me wrong, I did a few races as tune-ups, but generally the key was to increase and maintain mileage, and whatever I had to do that, reduce speed, was what I did. You can see this, the blue line at the top is the line that tracks my, what is called fitness, but actually this is kind of a cumulative load across the block. So the line rises because I'm applying more load as we go on. So raising my fitness by applying more load over the course of the build. tapering towards the end, obviously, as we reduce towards the marathon. It's handy to do that for me because of the cycling, and I know cycling doesn't replace running, but for me, it's kind of a way of thinking, well, I can't run enough, so therefore I'll make up the load on my body with cycling. And my weight's also on there. That's kind of this line here, this grey line starts about 82, 83 kilos and then drops down to, I think it was 77.5 kilos it got down to. I actually stopped weighing myself. That's why it's a flat line there. Stopped weighing myself after Madeira. There's no way I was going to get on the scales after that all-inclusive. But weight does make a difference. I'm not purposely setting out to lose weight. It's just that I started this block from a very low mileage, probably about 10, 15 miles a week, and I was unfit. I wasn't thinking about what I was eating or drinking, and I was doing very little exercise. So coming into this, I was obviously heavier. Coming out of it, I was lighter. Didn't do any dieting, didn't do any zealous carb counting or anything like that. Just knocked the alcohol on the head. So near zero alcohol. I had a few beers for my birthday, March the 1st, but most of the time I was just eating normally, trying to be healthy, and having no alcohol. I was also thinking about recovery and rest, and the alcohol, I thought it was a magic bullet to improve my sleep. You see some people talk about quitting alcohol, and all these miraculous things that happen. Nothing miraculous really did happen. I kind of, laid awake at 2:00 in the morning and had to listen to running podcasts to get me through the night, most nights anyway, even without the alcohol. But in general, I feel like I've got more energy. I feel like I'm better in myself. So I'm going to keep the soberish lifestyle going, and probably try and knock caffeine on the head next and see if that helps my sleep. I'm down to a couple of cups of tea in the morning a day, and that's it now. So what about the race itself? I set off basically aiming for 3:07, 3:08 once I'd realised that the sub-3 attempt was not worth trying this year. It certainly felt like the right call as soon as I set off at the back of that wave 3 with all the crowds. Say it took me till mile 15 to catch the 3:10 pacer, so you can see how congested it was just in our wave. Here are the splits. Here are the splits from the London Marathon app. You'll know if you've done the London Marathon that the splits on your watch are notoriously inaccurate because of the buildings and the sheer number of people. So the timing mats are very useful for splits. So here are mine, and they look pretty consistent, I would think you would agree. The first kind of 5k is a 7:06, next 7:05, 7:05. Then I get a bit carried away, 7:03s, but then back to 7:04s, and then finish with a 7:06 and a 7:08. So I couldn't really do much better than that, and I wasn't using my watch to pace myself. I was just getting into a rhythm and feeling that I was running at the same pace. Certainly miles, from the start to mile 6, I thought, could I go faster and try for the sub-3 after all? But the crowds were slowing me down, so I put that thought out of my head as soon as I got through the first 10k. And then it was just a case of, enjoying the crowds, trying to read the signs, enjoying the fact that I was running within myself and just thinking, right, I'm locking in on the Good for Age goal now, relaxing into it and just feeling like I was having an enjoyable run. 13 to 24, went to 7:03, 7:04s. Body felt good. The fueling had been really good. I'll talk more about the fueling shortly. And the pacing held as a result. It's the last 2 miles probably that I actually felt like, I want this to end now. My hips were starting to play up. I felt kind of like, I could possibly be slowing down, but I didn't slow down that much. So a slight fade, but nothing dramatic. Probably worth looking at my heart rate as well, because I'm talking about running within myself and actually, what does that mean for me? Well, I always wear a heart rate monitor, so Garmin Pro Plus, and most of the training runs I wore that Garmin for just to effectively work out where my fitness was at, really. I was running fairly slow, so what I was looking for was a lower heart rate for those slower zone 2 kind of math type runs. So I ran the London Marathon with the same heart rate monitor, so all the stats are pretty reliable. And here's the graph for the London Marathon itself, and as you can see, it's heart rate sat around 147 for the whole race. My threshold, although I haven't tested this for a while, but was about 160. So I haven't really gone anywhere near threshold, and actually, for me, 140s was probably an ideal marathon pace given the fitness I've got. I have this spreadsheet, this Jack Daniels tables spreadsheet, which I'll post a link in the comments as to where you can get this from, but it's quite useful. I certainly use a lot of Jack Daniels stuff in my own coaching and my training. But in this spreadsheet, what we've got for me as somebody who is a heart rate max of 170, what the spreadsheet's effectively telling me is that my marathon heart rate, so my heart rate that I could sustain comfortably for the marathon, would be 146. So that's kind of whereabouts I was. You might notice on this that it's also projecting me a 2:49.49 for the marathon. But this is based on a half marathon time that I did last year, the Brass Monkey half marathon in York. If you ever looking for something in January in York, it's very, very oversubscribed. But if you manage to get in, it's a good, flat, fast race. And so I'd done a 1:21.27 at the Brass Monkey last year. And that was kind of what I was plugging in here in an attempt to think, well, if all was going well for the marathon, that's where I'd be at. I did do some races this year in the run-up to London. I did the Brass Monkey again, and that was run really at marathon pace because I was fairly unfit for that one. And I ran the Liversedge half on March the 1st, which was my birthday when I was 59. And then the Spend 20, which is a 20-mile race around a similar circuit in the Pennine area. Again, very, very hilly, and tried to run that at marathon effort as well. So those were the kind of the speed, if you like, stuff that I did, the marathon pace work that I did. Most of everything else was very easy, comfortable, mileage build. I did very little in the way of speed, VO2 max stuff. Certainly wasn't smashing out a park run every weekend. Did a few park runs and got my time down to about maybe 1908 or something. But nowhere near what I was capable of a few years ago when I was running around a 17:42 at Stretford Park Run. Around the Boston time, so there was nothing at the top end that was anywhere near what I was doing in the past. But it was that kind of bread and butter mileage that held the block together, really. So heart rate was 147, comfortable zone for me. The other thing I was tracking as well as heart rate was my blood glucose levels. So I mentioned I have type 1 diabetes. Was diagnosed in 2011, and since 2017 I've used an insulin pump. So that's one of these things. You can see the wire there that goes into my body, and it delivers insulin. It's just a little pump basically in there that's delivering insulin. In fact, probably see it there. It's delivering some insulin to me now. So this one is fairly intelligent. It's communicating via my phone with a continuous glucose monitor. This one's a Dexcom G6. I'll do a zoom in of this. And this is relaying the information every 5 minutes to my phone to say what my blood glucose levels are at. And then the pump picks that information up and says, well, actually, you need more insulin now, or you've got too much insulin, I'll stop delivering insulin. So it's a clever little kind of feedback loop there, keeping my blood sugars fairly stable. The thing is, when you do exercise, that kind of changes the game. And so you need to be careful. And I was managing my blood sugar with this being fairly new to me. So the Spend 20, the liver sedge, no, just the Spend 20, in fact, was a chance for me to check some stuff. And I did. I checked how it worked for me during the Spend 20, and my blood sugars ran too high, even though this was monitoring and adjusting. So I had to make some changes. So I did make changes during the race. What I did was there's a thing called an ease off mode, which you would put on generally when you're doing the exercise. I didn't switch that on. I just left it running normally and just started having carbohydrates, 30 grams every 20 minutes, about every 5k I think it was in practice. The Lucozade gel things that they got on the course, I just learnt to tolerate those, and every 20 minutes took one, and my blood sugars were good. In fact, here's the graph of my blood sugars. You can see there, it looks like a bit of a roller coaster, but actually the number 7, it doesn't go higher than 7, and there's a slight dip below 5 there, but generally it's between 5 and 7, which is almost like a normal person. So at times, like, I felt like my pancreas was actually doing its job, but it wasn't the pancreas that was doing it for me. It was the pump, it was the phone, it was the glucose monitor, and also I've got the readings on my my watch as well. In fact, I can show you now that there's just below the time is my blood glucose, 13.7 at the moment, so it's high at the moment. So that's probably why it's delivering some insulin to me to try and bring me back down. But during the race, everything was fine. Also, the lead up to the race is quite a challenge for us with diabetes because we carb loading, and carb loading means more sugar, it means more insulin, and that is quite difficult to manage normally. I really did track the carbs very carefully, and here's my carbs 2 days before, and I got up to about 800 grams of carbs. I'm about 80 kg, so I was aiming for 10 times my body weight in grams of carbs. And I got there, and some of that stuff, Haribo, flapjacks, Nature Valley bars, all sorts of kind of sugary stuff and drinks, wasn't great, but it was easy to get the sugar in and the fuel in using those sugary snacks. So I made it, and my blood sugar stayed stable. And then the day after, the Saturday, the day before, I did another 800 plus grams, similar kind of food, similar kind of approach, and blood sugar stayed stable for me. So what does this all mean, kind of implications for me going forward? Because obviously it's all well and good doing a 307.16 and everything working out, but what are the implications for me going forward? Well, I'm 59. I was kind of thinking that could I go for a sub 3, but I didn't attempt it. So what I've got now is that information that if I go into attempt it next year, which I am, which is what this channel is going to be all about, then what I need to do is I need to make sure that I've got my mileage up. I mean, durability is going to be my limiting factor. I need more than 36 miles a week to go sub 3. I'm sure I do at 60. And my goal really throughout 2026 is to see if I can just accumulate 40 miles a week all year. So when I get into 2027 in January, I'm starting at a much higher base. So hopefully then I can absorb more mileage, get up to 55, 60 a week, and do a bit more marathon pace work and maybe run some long runs. I'm thinking of doing the same races in the lead up again. So that'll be the Brass Monkey in January, and this time try and target a sub 120, which is ambitious, but I have been fairly close recently in that 121, and I would like to go under 120 again. The Liver Sedge Half, the Spend 20 are hilly races which feel much longer than they actually are, so I'll give those again at a marathon pace effort. And then London 2027 will be my sub 3 at 60 goal. Assuming I get in for a good for age, I mean, I'm hoping with 307 low I can get in for a good for age, but who knows? If I don't get in there, I'll have to try Edinburgh or maybe even Manchester. So look, I've been running since the age of 11, running cross country. Had a really good coach when I was at school who instilled in me the values of running that I still have now. You know, it's about enjoyment. It's about seeing running at 59 as kind of a privilege and something that is good for me mentally, physically. Helps me manage my diabetes, really, at the end of the day. So I'm going to build a marathon base, but it's not the be all and end all. You know, coaching the athletes at the club where I'm a coach at a club, running alongside my daughter and helping her getting into running, and giving myself some perspective on the marathon. It's just one part of a life well lived rather than my whole personality and definition. So if you're a masters runner and you're still wondering whether you can do it in your 50s and 60s, I'm here hopefully to share the journey with you, to share the idea that you can. I'll try and post a video once a month, some data driven stuff, some maybe get outside and show you some of the routes and places around here where I run, and try and keep this going as a way of chronicling what it's like to focus on a sub 3 at 60. My priority is staying fit and healthy, enjoying my running while I'm managing the diabetes. Thanks for listening. I'm back to the newspaper to see who else is in here. There's somebody right at the end there. Liz. I'm looking for that woman I saw on Facebook who was smoking a fag right at the back. I wonder what time she did. Takes all sorts running a marathon. It's a different beast than it was when I first ran a marathon in 1994, but I think life's richer for it. And I was part of a Guinness World Record for this marathon, the most finishes ever. Takes all sorts to finish the London Marathon, but I'm going for sub 3 at 60 next year. See you then.